Not gonna lie, it has been a rough couple of months in Famidaily land. While there have been some bright spots and a few surprises, about 75% of what I've played for the past several months have been games that could best be described as mediocre. And that changes as of right now. Not that I'm an especially big fan of Lord of King. It's just that it's an action game that's more ambitious than a lot of what we've seen lately. Besides being the only instance where the Japanese title is easier to pronounce than the US one, the Lord of King has a bit of a complicated history. It started out as an arcade game, and despite beating it, I can only really remember two things about that game. The final stage had you fight the xenomorphs from Aliens, and when you fought women, you'd knock their tops off. So not the greatest foundation, but the Lord of King on the Famicom is a different game from the Lord of King in the arcade. It's also a different game from Makyo Densetsu, the PC Engine game known overseas as the legendary Axe, that was by the same team and used a lot of the same mechanics. The story of the game is that you're a young man in modern Tokyo drawn into a mystical world to save the kingdom of Remelia, which I'm pretty sure is a result of transliterating Lemuria to Japanese and then back to English. There's an evil wizard who hangs out on a throne, and his skeleton knight general that you have to fight, while you get assistance from a fairy. The introduction cutscenes and the cutscenes between levels are actually pretty extensive here. The game is a side-scrolling hack-and-slash in the style of Rastan. You work your way toward the end of the stage, and fairly often a tough enemy will appear that takes many hits to defeat. One of the big things about the Lord of King is the power meter. The power meter determines how much damage you do with each swing, and it slowly builds up after you attack. You'll get regular increases for it, and toward the end of the game it can take several seconds for you to build up to full power again. Because the enemies in the Lord of King take a lot of damage, you often can't wait for full power, and the damage that enemies do increases as you go through levels, and that makes you rely on the knockback from your weapon. As you might guess, there are a lot of potential power-ups. The power-ups are dropped by these idols that you have to smash, and while they're generally the same thing, there are some that have a small chance to drop something else. This icon will increase the length of your power meter, but they're a little bit funny, because each of them only increases it to a certain amount. So collecting this power-up on level 1 increases the meter to here, and if you die and collect it again, it doesn't increase the meter further. Collecting the wings icon makes the power meter recover faster. You can collect this icon to improve your weapon. There's 3 levels of weapons, and each one increases the damage that you do, while decreasing costs to use magic. If you die, however, you lose one of your weapon levels. The potions recover health, the red ones just a little amount, the blue ones recover you to full. And this rare icon will give you an extra life. Besides your weapon attack, you have spell power. There are 3 spells that you have right from the start that you can use. You switch between them by pressing start and then hitting up and down. The default, and by far the best spell, is the fire spell. For the cost of about 1/4 of your spell bar, you do a big explosion that clears away any regular enemies, and does severe damage to bosses. You cast the spells by holding up and pressing B. The lightning spell is the most powerful spell, instantly destroying everything on screen, but it costs all of your magic. The fire spell already does that and costs less. The final spell is the freeze spell, which is the cheapest, and it just stops enemies in their tracks for a few seconds. It's not horrible, but the most effective place I found to use magic was against bosses, and this spell doesn't really help you there. There are 10 stages, divided up among 6 worlds. Every stage has some kind of tough enemy at the end of it, but not every stage has a boss, a confrontation with an enormous monster who often has multiple phases to the fight. In fact, the very first proper boss is a 2-phase fight. Some of the stages are vertical, and you can jump up through some platforms, but you can't go down through them. The Lord of King is a pretty difficult game. When you die, you go back to the start of that stage, even if you are fighting the boss at the end. The stages can be pretty long, too, like this one close to the end of the game where it's a maze of doors. When you get a game over, you can just hit start to continue from that stage. The Lord of King features some really huge sprites, though they are kind of slow. and your attacking is so slow that you have to be cautious about picking your shots. If you mistime an attack, you are going to get hit and you will get hurt badly. At least you can knock projectiles out of the air. The placement of enemies tends to be pretty nasty too, like placing projectile spitters on the edges of pits. You can hit them, you just have to inch your way off that edge until you can strike them without falling in. If the Lord of King is just too much for you, there are a few cheat codes. You can enter this to bring up a level select screen, and this code makes you invulnerable, though you still die to falling into pits. The reaction to this game among Japanese Famicom fans is, it's decent enough. Everybody noted the impressive sprite work and cinematic cutscenes, while complaining about the slow combat and nasty enemies. As for myself, I kinda wish that this game only consisted of the bosses. The action stages are okay, passable but not really enthralling. Those enormous bosses wind up being the best part of the game, and I wish that when they killed me, I'd get right back into a fight with them, rather than having to play the stage again. I can't say I'm a big fan of the Lord of King, but it is a real showcase of how Famicom games are improving. I don't think we would have seen anything like this at the end of 1988. And going forward, this kind of quality is going to be the baseline, not a standout.